I can't really say what is the right way or what is the wrong way. But I know that through the years that I've worked internationally, I have seen hundreds of ways to do the same thing. And I think it ultimately comes down to, at the moment, the kids are not the same as they were 10 years ago, as they were 15 or 20 years ago. You cannot push them in the way that you could 15 or 20 years ago. And we're at a point now where, and I've been very, very thankful and very grateful to be around a circle of coaches in my last 10 years of some of the best coaches in the world. And one of the things that I've learned from them outside of the technical side of the sport and what makes them successful is that they are constantly adapting to suit their athletes. And that doesn't mean they're changing their philosophy or they're changing their values. They're finding a way to make that athlete successful rather than requiring that athlete to be successful for them. And I think what I've seen over the last 10 years is that there are many coaches that feel it's the athlete's job to finish their program. It's the athlete's job to do what the coach says. And there are many times where that is an accurate statement. But there are also many times where the coach should be reflecting and asking themselves, what can I be doing better to motivate my athlete? Or what can I be doing better to serve my athlete? That they want to come in and that they want to finish the program, or that they want to do one more repetition, or that they want to push themselves a little bit harder the next time. I find that the difference, in my opinion, between these really high level and successful coaches and who I would say are not at that level is their self-reflection and their willingness to learn and to adapt new strategies to meet the demands. If we were in a product industry where we were selling a product, we wouldn't continue selling a product that people weren't buying. We would have to update our product, we would have to change our product, or we wouldn't have a job. So coaching is no different. My product, what I'm offering, has to always evolve with what the market needs. And right now, the kids need something different than what they needed 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And so it's my job to become educated in those ways, or to have people around me who can support me in my job and to help support our athletes. Support and to instill love in the sport. I think passion is one of the strongest things that you can develop. With passion and with love in anything comes motivation, and with motivation directed in the right way becomes success. And so for me, in young athletes, teaching them to fall, teaching them to fail, teaching them to dust themselves off and still love what they're doing, because that's part of life, is probably for me one of the most important things you can teach. I think the presence of computers and mobile devices is probably the biggest hindrance to our kids these days. I grew up, I'm not as old as some people, but I grew up at the time of dial-up internet. And when mobile phones first came out, there were no text messages. We had beepers, right? So there was still some delayed gratification. I had an allowance. I had to explain, oh my goodness. I had to explain to a 30-year-old, 29-year-old girl what an encyclopedia was. She didn't understand that it was a series of books and you had to read book. Unbelievable. But this for me was a really eye-opening experience, that somebody as old as 30 has not had this experience away from computers. And so I think that the mindset from the kids, we're at a point now where the people who are in their 30s who are now having kids grew up with computers. So they individually, unless they were brought up differently, they had quick access to things in some level. So from 20, 30 years ago, this problem began evolving. And so now we're in a situation where the parents don't have anybody who has ever been there before to lean on. They don't know how to be hard on their kids because their kids they have luxuries they didn't have. And if they ask their parents for advice, their parents didn't have anything that their kids had. And I guess that's true in a lot of senses, but nothing has changed society like the internet. Nothing has, I guess the next closest thing would have been the public transit or a car. We had to walk everywhere or ride a horse. Okay, that was a significant change, or electricity. So if we're thinking about those huge steps in society, nobody in our generation has really lived through that change. Just the same as nobody in our generation has ever lived through a pandemic like Corona. We don't know the right way to handle things. We don't know what is the right way. Nobody wants to say the wrong thing or to make the wrong move. And so I think it's really hard. I think parents are very tentative to make the right or the wrong move because they were brought up in this mishmash of old school living and new school learning. And now we have generations of kids who have handies, who want everything now. And some parents are just giving it to them because they have to work two jobs and they don't have the time, or whatever the reason may be. I find that the kids are more and more now, and more marshmallow eaters, and not so many not marshmallow eaters. And so I think we as a society, or we as coaches, are spending, or need to spend, as much time bringing that back as we can, because that is, for me, a crucial trait that we need to instill in our children, not only for sport, but for life. It would be a scary thing to see leaders of the world who want things now. So I think patience is a virtue, and hard work and goal setting is something that is very valuable. And often we're educating the parents on what we feel would be in the best interest of their kids. And maybe they don't always agree with us, because what's right for the athlete, what's right for the kid, is not always the same thing, and that we understand. But I think sometimes the parents could have better experience around how the psychology and the mental aspect of kids these days is working. It's only been in the last few years that I've been speaking with experts in the sport and colleagues about, this really is a society change in mental thought and ways of thinking. This isn't so much about our coaching anymore, or this isn't so much about the environment as it is how that environment is perceived. And so we as coaches, or previous ways of thinking where it wasn't about how you perceive it, this is the way it needs to be, is not acceptable anymore. And I think that's really hard for my generation and people older than me, or people around my generation, because we have not, as coaches and as people, have not had to adapt to that. We've just been told, this is the way it is, you need to deal with it. And now that's not an acceptable answer in society anymore, particularly in my sport. And that's a hard change. If I was going to compare to my own personal life, I think to be the cheerleader, to help them turn the negatives into the positives, to help them reinforce and understand what the coaches are trying to bring forward as characteristics, to let them understand that failing is okay and that failing is a good thing, because if you're not failing, maybe your goals aren't high enough. And if you're failing too often, maybe your goals are too high. But I think they need to be the cheerleader. Their job is to be the good cop. Our job as a coach is sometimes to be the bad cop and to say that something wasn't good enough. But if the kids are not accepting of the fact that high performance sport is very black and white, the mental aspect is not so much, but you're either on the podium or you're not. And that isn't always your fault. You can have a perfect day and somebody was better than you.